Hello, everyone. So we made it to the American Revolution, okay? So this is the start of one of the most important chapters that we do in social studies because it leads up to everything else that we kind of get to. Okay, so this is chapter 5, the American Revolution. So lesson 1 is called Tensions with Britain. Now, we had in the last chapter wars with the Native Americans and the French, and everybody was kind of fighting over this land. Well, now we're back to these colonists, and they have increasing tensions with Britain. Okay, so let's get started. The British and French, as well as the colonists, and American Indians all took part in the French and Indian War. Each group had its own resources to go to war. France and Britain were European rivals who fought over land in North America. American Indians wanted to keep their lands. The British colonists felt loyal to Britain. Soon, however, tension between the colonies and Britain would rise. Then the idea of a revolution began to grow, especially in the middle colonies. Their colonists saw differences between themselves and the British. Taxes cause trouble. The British became involved in the French and Indian Wars because they believed that the Ohio River Valley belonged to them. The king also believed that he was protecting the colonists who settled on this land. As you've read, the Proclamation of 1763 gave Britain large sections of North America, including French territories east of the Mississippi River. King George III of England kept colonists from expanding further westward. He hoped to keep the peace with American Indians who lived on those lands. During the French and Indian War, the British ordered the colonies to organize so that they could make treaties between the colonies and the Iroquois Confederacy. The result was the Albany Plan of Union, proposed by Benjamin Franklin of Pennsylvania. The plan called for Congress, a lawmaking body. The Congress would represent all of the colonies. It would have the power to keep an army, levy taxes, and plan for westward expansion. The document said in part, okay, so this is a primary source. This is coming directly from the Albany Plan of Union, okay, in 1754. That they make laws for regulating and governing such new settlements, till the crown shall think fit to form them into particular governments. Okay, so basically saying that laws are going to come for regulating and governing them until the king decides that the colonies can govern themselves. And our little illustration at the bottom, we have George Washington, okay, very important guy in our history. George Washington on horseback was from the colony of Virginia. He fought for the British during the French and Indian War. Okay, he was a general during the war. The plan was rejected by King George III, who feared that it would make the colonies too powerful. In addition, leaders in Great Britain decided to tax American colonists to pay for the French and Indian War. Great Britain had an enormous debt, which meant that it owed money. Britain then passed the Stamp Act, which taxed every piece of printed paper that colonists used. This included legal documents, newspapers, licenses, and even playing cards. Colonists were not represented in Parliament, Britain's assembly that makes laws. Many felt that the British government should not tax them. No taxation without representation became a common cry. Colonists believed only representatives they elected to their colonial assemblies could pass tax laws. The Albany Plan caused colonists to begin thinking about forming a union. Some colonists, such as Patrick Henry from Virginia, became outspoken opponents of the Stamp Act. Soon, the colonists were meeting to discuss the situation. Okay, so we've got a little picture here. It's a 1 penny stamp. Parliament required a stamp on every piece of printed paper in the colonies as part of the Stamp Act. And we'll read a little bit more about what the Stamp Act actually did. We have an illustration here. It says the Stamp Act Congress met in 1765 to discuss how to deal with Great Britain's unjust tax. Okay, this Stamp Act, according to the colonists, was not fair. Okay, it said that it taxed every piece of printed paper that they used. Newspapers, playing cards. Okay, could you imagine if you had to pay tax on every playing card that you probably have? Or just reading the newspaper, you'd have to pay a tax. Okay, they did not like this idea. Another primary source, this is a very famous illustration that you probably see throughout your years of education. It always comes up. It's a political cartoon. Now, it's kind of like, I don't know how many of you actually look at the Sunday paper, or if you get the Sunday paper. The comics, the Sunday comics that are in the paper, those are cartoons. So this was a political cartoon published by Benjamin Franklin. It shows the weakness of the colonies because they were divided. The pieces of the snake represent the colonies. The NE at the head of the snake stands for the 4 New England colonies. So they had the New England colonies. They had New York, New Jersey, Rhode Island, Massachusetts, Vermont, North Carolina, South Carolina. Okay, there's all different parts of this snake. And obviously divided, the snake is useless. It's not going to be able to do anything. Okay? Our first reading checkpoint is Cause and Effect, how the French and Indian War affected the relationship between Britain and the 13 colonies. You don't have to discuss it with a partner. If you would like to discuss it with mom, dad, cousin, whoever's there, you can. Or just jot your answer down in this little blank space right here. It does not need to be a long answer at all. All right, so let's see what the colonists do. The colonists take action. In response to what they believed to be unjust taxation, some colonies requested that Parliament repeal the Stamp Act. These requests were rejected. In 1765, representatives from 9 colonies met in New York for a meeting that was called the Stamp Act Congress. The Congress consisted of delegates, or representatives, from the colonies, including farmers, lawyers, and businessmen. As a group, they demanded that Parliament repeal the Stamp Act. Although the taxes were small, the colonists did not like the patterns they set. At this time, most colonists were loyal to the crown, meaning they backed the king. They took issue only with Parliament's taxation. The Stamp Act resolves the result of the Stamp Act Congress, acknowledged that the king still had the right to make laws in the colonies. Other groups wanted to send a stronger message to the king. A group called the Sons of Liberty began to organize protests against the Stamp Act. They wrote literature encouraging boycotts or refusals to buy British products. The Sons of Liberty was a secret group. It formed in 1765 to protect colonists' rights and protest the British taxation. So the colonists are starting to not like what's going on. So they decide to kind of take matters into their own hands. Okay, and we've got a little quest connection over here because reading checkpoint 1 didn't have too much for us to do, so we're going to do this. Identify and circle the most relevant facts about the Stamp Act. Explain how the act added to the tension between the colonies and Great Britain. Now, what is something that we need to know about this? Okay, why did the colonists have to take action? Because they believed this to be unjust taxation, meaning basically that it wasn't fair. Okay? They didn't think that the king should be able to do that. So, how did they act? And what did they do afterwards? Well, they demanded, right here, first paragraph, they demanded that Parliament repeal the Stamp Act. Repealing means to kind of shut down or stop or overturn it and make it into something that's a little bit more fair. Okay? So let's see what else they do. Okay, so we have an illustration at the top. It says colonial protesters did not think Parliament had the right to tax them. Here, colonists protest British taxes by confronting the royal governor of North Carolina. Okay, you can tell they're not very happy. Okay, you've got British soldiers on one side, and you got the colonists angry on the other side. Members also burned stamps and threatened stamp agents. The Daughters of Liberty, another part of the group, encouraged colonists to spin their own cloth instead of using British-made cloth. In March 1766, Great Britain was losing money due to the boycotts. It was the boycotts more than the Congress that led to the repeal of the Stamp Act. The repeal marked a milestone for the colonies. It was the first time that representatives from the colonies had come together. It was also the first time that the British government backed down when met with colonial resistance. Along with the repeal, however, Parliament passed the Declaratory Act of 1766. The king feared that the colonies were becoming too strong. The Declaratory Act sent the message that the king retained the authority to make laws for the colonies. And if you don't know what retained is, read over here in our academic vocabulary. It means to keep. So this act was saying, well, even though we got rid of the Stamp Act, the king is still in charge, and you're not going to change that. Although many agreed with the king, some British lawmakers did not. William Pitt, the elder, argued in front of the Parliament that it was unconstitutional to tax the colonies. So we have our third primary source here, and this is from William Pitt's speech on the Stamp Act in 1766. So it says, "The Americans have not acted in all things with prudence, wisdom, and temper, calmness. They have been wronged. They have been driven to madness by injustice. Will you punish them for the madness you have occasionally caused? Rather let prudence and temper come first from this side. I will undertake, take the side, for America, that she will follow the example." So William Pitt was a British member, okay, and he thought it was unjust, so he decided he wanted to change it, that it wasn't fair, okay? Second reading checkpoint, and then we're going to stop here. Identify the reasons for the colonists' anger about the Stamp Act. So why did they not like the Stamp Act? That's what we're going to kind of look at. Okay, so they didn't believe what? That the king or whatever had the right to collect the taxes. Now, their anger is going to stem from this, that the colonies had their own lawmaking bodies. Okay? So I want you to go ahead and finish the rest of that sentence. The colonies had their own lawmaking bodies. So why would the Stamp Act, something that's imposed by the king and the Parliament, anger them? What did they feel? Okay? So you can say the colonies had their own lawmaking bodies. And they felt, and I want you all to fill in the blank. How did they feel? Okay? In the next part of this lesson, we will start right on the Townshend Acts. Okay? So we have the Stamp Act. Now we have another act that is being passed. All right. See you in the second part.